Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September public session. I am going to turn this over to Regina Alston, Commissioner Regina Alston, as our chairperson, Shalimar Thomas, is not available today.
I'm just substituting for Shalimar, our chairperson. I want to welcome everyone to the meeting. The first order of business is approval of the minutes for August 2021. Is there any addition that anyone would like to make or correction? Okay, then the minutes are approved. Next, we will deal with the cases that have been recommended by the staff and voted on by the subcommittee. I will read the cases and then ask for recusals and abstentions. The cases are as follows: Joseph David Barr versus the City of Philadelphia, Davell Williams versus Harvard Protection Services, Joseph Rausch versus School District of Philadelphia, Badira Anderson versus Aircraft Service International, Inc., doing business as Menzies Aviation, Amala Vaughn versus Frankie's World Foundation, Kalyan Denise Mook versus Trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, Katura Sanders versus Digitus Health, Patricia Rowley versus Eagle One Federal Credit Union, Michelle Hamilton versus Einstein Healthcare, Richard Ellis versus Save-A-Lot Food Stores, Ebony C. Parker versus Active Life, Brianna N. Glover versus Hill Friedman World Academy, David Stalling versus MacAdam Financial, Anthony Buselli versus Cintas Corporation, Bruce Committee versus St. Joseph's University, John Ditko versus Project Home, Michelle Hamilton versus Einstein Healthcare, Chiara Alonso versus QTC Management, Inc., Christopher Whitfield versus QTC Management, Inc., doing business as QTC Customer Service, Joseph Messina versus Penn Jersey Paper Company, LLC, Travis Lee versus Scotland Yard Security Services, Inc. Are there any recusals or abstentions?
I have a recusal from the first case, Barr versus City of Philadelphia.
Okay. And I'm recusing myself from case number 5, Moak versus Trustees of the University of Pennsylvania. Anybody else? Can I get would someone like to submit the cases for approval? Can I get
so moved? Yep.
Okay,
Second.
and then a second with Ricks, Commissioner Ricks. All in favor of approval of the cases recommended? No votes? Abstentions? Then the cases are approved. Okay. Now the Executive Director's report.
Thank you. I have just a few updates to share for this month reporting period. I will begin with the legislative updates. First, we have bill number 190558, protections for transgender youth. PCHR has submitted our proposed regulations rather, to the law department for approval. Once we receive the approval, we will file the proposed regulations with the Department of Records so that they can be made public and request for hearing can be made known. The second legislative update pertains to the Renters Access Act. Myself and Deputy Director Pam Gwaltney continue to meet with Councilmember Brooks's legislative director and other community stakeholders to develop best strategies for outreach to develop educational materials that will be distributed to the public. Unfortunately, regulations will not be completed before the implementation date for this bill, but we will continue to work diligently to have them completed in a timely manner. In terms of compliance, we have one update. Our current contract with the EEOC expires at the end of this month on September 30th. The compliance staff worked extremely hard to close out the employment discrimination cases, which was no small feat. In terms of prevention and education, CRD Representative Abigail Sue is assisting 2 public schools in the 7th Police District regarding school openings and concerns for cultural sensitivity and Stop Asian Hate education. CRD Representative Carlos Aviles monitored the neighborhood level feedback to provide advisement to Council District 7 regarding the clearing of homeless encampments at Kensington and Allegheny Avenues. In terms of other noteworthy conflict responses, CRD Representative Tiara Thomas mediated an intragroup dispute for a neighborhood association that serves residents of West Philadelphia. CRD Representative Boonrat Maat mediated a multi-party neighborhood dispute involving renters and surrounding neighbors in South Philadelphia, which had escalated involving a city council member, the police department, and the district attorney's office. And lastly, CRD Representative David Oliver is assisting the Philadelphia Department of Parks and Recreation to resolve conflict occurring at one of the rec centers in the northwest section of Philadelphia. Other noteworthy events for this reporting period are as follows. On the 26th of August, we were able to partner with the Philadelphia Bar Association, providing assistance in their passing of their own resolution to support House Bill 300, termed the Pennsylvania Fairness Act, which seeks to amend the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act by adding sexual orientation and gender identity or expression as a protected class. On August 27th, the City of Philadelphia coordinated with the federal government's Operation Allies Refugee to provide a point of entry location for individuals evacuated from Afghanistan. Deputy Director Randy Duque was asked by the OEM director to serve as an equity advisor to assist in problem identification and on-site resolution. To date, there have been over 10,000 Afghan refugees who have been received through the Philadelphia airport and have been processed onto their next destination for resettlement and repatriation. Next, I wanted to report that last month, we reported that Deputy Director Randy Duque had attended Tackle Upstander training, which was facilitated by Muflahan, a national Muslim nonprofit, and the American Jewish Committee, geared at recognizing and responding to hate crimes against Jews and Muslims. This month, PCHR was invited to participate in Muflahan's Community Resilience Early Warning System project, which is funded by the United States Department of Homeland Security to help local governments and municipalities develop violence prevention and community resilience strategies using a public health approach to analyzing public data, identifying community level risk, and other protective factors. On September 15th this week, myself and Deputy Director Randy Duque joined with other city officials in supporting the Mexican community by attending and celebrating the commemoration of the 200-year anniversary of Mexico's independence at City Hall. The mayor presented Consul General Carlos Obrador with a proclamation recognizing the day, and all participants there enjoyed festive food and cultural presentations by the Mexican consulate. The Mexican flag was raised, and it was generally a fun time for all who participated in that. There were 2 incidents of hate reported to our office this month, and year to date, there have been 57 incidents reported. However, only 41 of those, or not only, but 41 of those were confirmed and 8 were determined to be not hate related. 8 were also unconfirmed. Since November 2016, our office has reported 454 reports of hate, but of those, only 270 have actually been confirmed. 145 have been unconfirmed, and 33 were determined to be not hate related. So that
Sorry, what was the date? I missed the date that you just mentioned, the cumulative.
The cumulative since November of 2016 was when we began collecting the data. And that concludes my update for this reporting period. The next executive session is scheduled for October 8th at October 8th, 2021. And the public session will be held October 15th, 2021.
Are there any questions about the executive director's report? I had one question. There were 2 bills that required regulations written by the PCHR. And I guess I'm wondering to what extent the board needs to evaluate the regulations before they are sent out for comment. I just don't remember the procedure that we use.
Sure. So based on the Philadelphia Charter, the way that it goes is proposed regulations are submitted to the law department. The law department reviews them and makes any recommendation or for changes, and then sends those back to the department. And once that's done, they are forwarded over to the Department of Records to be made public. If there is any request for a public hearing, then it would come back to the commission to schedule the public hearing, invite comments from the public, and for the commission to hear those comments, either accept the recommendations for change and implement those into the regulations, or not accept the recommendations, and then vote on the proposed regulations to be accepted.
I guess I'm wondering about whether the commissioners look at the regulations before they're sent to the law department. Pam, do you remember the last time we had to do one of these? I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but maybe it was the cash.
Yeah, I think it was the cashless.
Yeah.
And I wasn't involved in the process, so I don't know really the steps that were taken. I filled in for Rue when she was away, and I remember reading something into the record on the day of our hearing. And we did have folks testify. After they testified, commissioners then met and talked about what they heard and what decisions, if any, were made regarding the regulations, and then rewrote the regs, and they were voted upon.
Right, and the question I had was whether we looked at them before we sent them to the law department, because I remember.
So I wouldn't know that because I wasn't involved in the process. I was only in at the end.
Yeah, because I remember going to the law department and meeting with, but who's no longer there?
Maybe
Can't remember.
Richie
Yeah,
Faber.
meeting with Richie before the regs were finalized and then sent out from the commission. So I guess I mean, because we're all sort of new to this, I'm wondering what the process is and whether we just need to check whether the commission should look at the regs before they are sent to the law department, or after they come back from the law department, then we vote on them, and then they are sent out for comment. Maybe
I,
somebody should try and
yes,
figure out what the regulations are.
I will follow up. It's not altogether clear in the code, but I can send out the regulations that we've proposed so far to the commission for your review. And then if you have any questions or recommended changes, you can let me know.
Because the first one had to do with transgender and gender non-conforming, and so that might be something that the commission might want to look at. And then the second one, I couldn't remember what that was.
The second one is for the Renters Access Act. And that was the combination of two bills. Part of the jurisdiction falls under the Fair Housing Commission and the
Right.
other under the Commission for Human Relations.
And
So,
you've created regulations for those that apply.
no, we actually have not gone through that process yet for that act. But we will be working on them. In fact, I was also contacted by Council Member Green's office yesterday to start the drafting process for regulations related to the prohibition on testing, pre-employment testing for marijuana, which apparently is also under our auspices. So we will be beginning that process as well soon. So I definitely want to get clarity from the commission on any questions or concerns that you may have about that during the drafting process, but I'll contact law to get a clearer picture on what the process is.
Yeah, as I said, we're all sort of negotiating this without Rue, so we're sort of trying to remember exactly what the procedures were. But I think the commissioners might be useful with regard to some of this. After you've promulgated, you can use us as a sounding board to give you some feedback, if that would be helpful.
It's curious that so many of these bills are requiring regulations. I mean, it's not routine for every bill to have regulations. And frankly, it's very confusing to the public because there's so many overlapping laws from the federal government, the state government, the city government, for them each to then also have regulations. I mean, and as Regina's pointing out, we have not routinely always had regulations. Is somebody just sort of requiring regulations? Like, is this mindfulness that they're actually requiring this for a reason? It doesn't seem, for example, it doesn't seem to me like if you have a requirement about a pre-employment screening for marijuana, why do you also need regulations for that? It seems like a fairly straightforward thing. You have it, you don't have it. You have a timeline, you don't have a timeline. It's make it needlessly complex to comply with the law.
I agree. I think that part of the issue, however, is that some of the ways that the bills are written and how they're incorporated into the code aren't necessarily clear to the audience that they're intended to govern. And so specifically for the bill related to transgender and non-conforming youth, I could imagine that they envisioned it would be problematic for certain institutions knowing what was unlawful and what wasn't. I think probably similarly with the Renters Access Act, because there has been so much dialogue with the landlord stakeholder groups about how their members would be complying with that. And there is some confusion within those particular bills, particularly because they are under two different commissions. And so understanding, how the process for filing a complaint and the remedy is not necessarily as clear as it should be. For the pre-employment testing, now that's one where I agree wholeheartedly. There's a prohibition, and that is clear. It's a prohibition. It goes into effect in January of 2022. I don't know if the remedy, I don't recall the remedy being spelled out there. So maybe that is what the issue is. But I did just a little bit of preliminary research last night to look at how because there's only three other states or local governments that have issued similar prohibitions. And so New York's Commission on Human Relations promulgated regulations or rules for their particular bill. And in their regulation, the only thing they did was carve out exceptions for what types of positions you could require pre-hire testing for marijuana. That was it. Quite frankly, what differentiates us from the other two states is that, for example, in New York, there is state law that recreational use of marijuana is that it is not illegal. Recreational use of marijuana is not illegal, as with Colorado. Pennsylvania doesn't have that same those same types of law.
And of course, it's always illegal under federal law.
And always illegal under federal law. So
I'm hoping that they won't start, I'm hoping that City Council won't routinely start expecting us to draft regulations, not only because it's onerous for the commission and to enforce it, but because it's very difficult for law-abiding citizens to understand these multiple overlapping sources of law and to conform their behavior. So I don't know, it sounds like if you're going to build exceptions into this, that could be part of the legislation. It doesn't have to be regular. Anyway. And
it looks like, honestly, it looks like the regulation itself or the bill itself incorporated those exceptions. So I'm just gonna meet with the office to sort of push back about what we would do here and carve out any sort of collaboration that we need to have with the Department of Labor. So maybe that's a conversation that they want to have with them. So we shall see, but that's hot off the press and certainly within this reporting period. So I wanted to share that.
I suspect that regulations are required where you have organized interests that are represented by lawyers. So if you're talking about youth organizations, you're going to have some players that you would expect to object, and they are represented by lawyers. And the same is true with anything having to do with rental property. And with regard to marijuana, you're definitely going to have organized interests represented by lawyers seeking to narrow the focus of the law, and then you'll have other groups that are attempting to maintain the interests of prospective employees. And we're sort of in the middle trying to mediate that. And so I think we can expect for there to be more more of a obligation put on the PCHR, and the limited resources of the PCHR make that particularly problematic. But if you can, if there's something that the commissioners can do to help, you should feel free to call on us. You've got, what, 4 lawyers here looking at you at this point. So there might be some expertise and some help here to lighten the load of the staff. But it seems like you're really on top of it, Gia, and we're most appreciative of that.
Absolutely. It's just a heavy lift for you, Kia. I mean, it's an awful lot to expect right at the outset. Before I forget, I wanted to make sure that I tell everybody that I cannot attend the public session in October. I will be there for the executive session, but not the public session. And the second thing I wanted to ask, just while Steve is on the call, I'm sure Nationalities, I'm sure your organization has been very involved in welcoming the Afghan refugees. And I know that one thing that your organization has asked people to do is to make contributions that can be sort of funneled into the most effective way to help them. But I wanted to ask you, since you're on the call, is there anything else that we can do to help Afghan refugees coming in?
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, some of the calls as we work with the city on the airport arrivals, definitely speakers of the relevant languages to sign up, both with organizations like ours that are able to hire people to do the work, so they're actually getting some income from it. But there's also volunteer interpreters through the city, particularly the health department, that are helping out as well. I think that's one of the major areas. These efforts, once the Afghans are actually resettled into Philadelphia, which right now, they're sort of being processed at the airport, heading out to the bases. But once they start coming back into the community, I think there's going to be a lot of work around creating welcoming efforts, there are efforts on the legal side, trying to get pro bono attorneys and getting that message out. But I think a lot of it, thinking about housing and employment opportunities, we'll be doing messaging around that. And at the same time, being aware, especially with the role of this commission and this agency on community relations, that not everybody is in as much agreement with the resettlement of Afghans, and to sort of work on those issues and pay attention to that. And I know Deputy Director Randy could also be really helpful in that as well. So I'll definitely keep the commission and the organization posted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any of the other commissioners have anything that they want to raise about what they've been doing, or issues that the commission might put on our radar? Anybody?
I'm still hoping that at some point we can have somebody from the law department come in and do a really full explanation of the ramifications of the Fulton decision, which obviously has to do with the immediate issue, but also some of the ramifications of that Supreme Court decision on anti-discrimination law. I think there's going to be some potentially different interpretations of some of the terms that we deal with on a routine basis. I think the full impact of Fulton may take a while to fully understand. So I would appreciate some sort of update. I happen to live down the street from Jane Isfan, and so she gives me updates every time she walks by with her dog, but I'd still like to get a more formal update.
And I'll follow up with the law department regarding that, because we have been trying to get them to do this presentation now for about a couple of months. So I'll try and escalate our request.
Anybody else? Okay, he has told us that we're going to be meeting in executive session on the 8th of October and public session on the 15th. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Anybody? Commissioner Alpert, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Laren, all in favor? See you next month.
All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too, you too.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.